July 12th, 2024, American Fork, Utah. A quiet residential street on a warm summer evening. Across the street from one particular house, a neighbor is going about her night when she hears something that doesn't belong in this neighborhood. Bangs. Loud ones. 6 of them, maybe 8, in rapid succession. Then a pause. Then one final shot. She reaches for her phone. But before she dials 911, she does something that will later matter in a courtroom. She sends a text to the woman who lives in that house. A woman she knows. A 60-year-old grandmother named Tracy Grist. And Tracy Grist texts back. Her reply, shown to a jury a year later, again says, in effect, he had a knife, and my son Kevin shot him. Inside that house, a 42-year-old father of 2, named Matthew Restelli, is dying on the floor with 7 bullets in his body. Matthew drove to this house, his mother-in-law's house, believing one simple, ordinary thing: that he was here to pick up his wife and his 2 children and take them home to California. He had no idea his wife had already decided she was never going back. He had no idea his brother-in-law was waiting with a gun. And he had no idea that prosecutors would one day stand in front of a jury and describe this house, this ordinary suburban house, with 2 words that tell you everything you need to know about this case: the family trap.
About Matt a lot?
I would not say a lot, but she would openly express her feelings about him when Kate would call her and she would talk about it.
Okay. Did either Kate or Tracy ever talk to you about wanting Kate to divorce Matt?
Yes.
How frequently?
I feel like I've only heard of it within the last couple of years. Like I said, Kate didn't really discuss her marriage status with me and her issues or happiness with him, just based on what I think she was comfortable sharing with me.
I've handed you what's marked as State's Exhibit 1.
Okay.
Did you recognize one? Yes. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes, I do.
And what are those?
These are text messages between myself and my mom, Tracy Grist.
Okay, and do you know what date those were?
It's showing as 6/6/24.
Okay, stay with me to admit State's Exhibit 1.
No objection.
Thank you.
Before this is a murder case, it's a story about a man. So let's start with him. Matthew Restelli was 42 years old, one of 3 sons, Thomas, Jonathan, and Matthew, raised by a mother who would one day have to sit in a courtroom and describe the last of her boys in the past tense. He was a husband, a father of 2 young children, a man living in California, working, raising his kids. By all outward appearances, a life like millions of others. He was married to a woman named Catherine, and Catherine came with a family of her own. Her mother, Tracy Grist, and her brother, Kevin Ellis. Matthew's own mother would later testify about her daughter-in-law. She didn't use warm words. She described Catherine with 2 words that hang over this entire case like a warning nobody heard in time. Dark and tough. Whether that was a grieving mother's hindsight or something she'd always sensed, the jury would have to decide. But by the summer of 2024, one thing was objectively true. Matthew Restelli's marriage was coming apart. Every murder that happens inside a family has a prologue. This one has a strange, almost surreal opening scene. Disneyland. In 2024, the family took a trip to Disney, and on that trip, a place built on the idea of happy families, Matthew and Catherine had an argument. The subject, according to trial testimony, cheating. And somewhere in that period, you know how Tracy Grist, yes, Matthew's mother-in-law, said something that would come back to haunt her in a courtroom. She said she would strangle him. On the witness stand, more than a year later, she would insist it was a joke. Just a thing people say. Dark humor between family members? Maybe. Families say ugly things all the time, and nobody dies. But keep that comment in your pocket, because the question a jury eventually had to answer is whether it was a joke or a preview. Around this same time, Tracy Grist bought AirTags, small tracking devices, and by her account, put them on the children. For safety, she said. And Catherine? After arriving in Utah with the kids, Catherine was preparing for a divorce. She was already on dating apps. Notice the picture forming: a wife who has mentally left the marriage, a mother-in-law making strangling jokes and buying trackers, and a husband back in California who believes, genuinely believes, that this is temporary, that his wife and children are coming home. Someone just has to tell him when to come pick them up. At some point in early July 2024, that call came. Matthew was told, "Come to Utah. Come to your mother-in-law's house in American Fork. Pick up Catherine and the kids and take them home. Put yourself in Matthew's seat for the drive. Whatever the problems in his marriage, the arguments, the suspicion, the distance, this trip is good news. This is the trip where his family comes back. Maybe he's rehearsing what he'll say. Maybe he's thinking about the kids' rooms, waiting for them in California. He is driving toward a house where, according to the eventual guilty plea of his own wife, 3 people have already decided he isn't leaving. Because here is what Catherine Restelli admitted in court, under oath, after taking a plea deal. She had no intention of going back to California. None. The pickup story was the bait. And instead of simply telling Matthew the marriage was over, instead of divorce papers, lawyers, custody hearings, all the ugly but survivable machinery of a failed marriage, she worked with her mother and her brother to kill him. Let that settle for a second. Divorce was on the table. She was on dating apps. The legal exit existed, and she was already walking toward it. They chose the other door anyway. In the days before Matthew arrived, Tracy Grist cleaned her house. At trial, she'd explained this the way any grandmother would. Company was coming. You clean the house for company. Who doesn't? But prosecutors saw those same hours differently, as a stage being prepared. And then there's her search history. When investigators pulled Tracy Grist's digital records, 2 things stood out. First, she had searched for information about the Adelson case. If you followed the true crime, you know that name. One of the most infamous family murder conspiracies in modern American history, in which members of a wealthy family, including the family matriarch, were convicted in the murder for hire of a son-in-law. Read that again. A mother-in-law researching a case about a mother-in-law who had her son-in-law killed. Days or weeks before her own son-in-law was shot dead in her living room. Her explanation on the stand: she just liked true crime. It was a popular story. Millions of people read about it. And honestly, that defense isn't crazy. Millions of people do follow that case. If searching about the Adelsons made you a murderer, half of YouTube would be in prison. But then there's the second search. Cemeteries. Her explanation: a hiking trip. Some cemeteries are historic. People visit them. One of these searches alone is nothing. Both of them together in the same window of time in the home where a lured man is about to die. That's what prosecutors call a pattern and what defense attorneys call a coincidence. The jury would get to choose. The evening of July 12th, 2024. Matthew Restelli arrives at the house in American Fork. What exactly happened inside in those first minutes? The words, the movements, who stood where? Only the people in that house know, and their accounts shifted over time. What the physical evidence and testimony establish is this: Kevin Ellis, Tracy's son, Catherine's brother, shot Matthew Restelli. The neighbor across the street heard 6 to 8 bangs in quick succession. A possible pause, then a final shot. Sit with that sequence. 6 to 8 rounds. A pause. One more. 3 days later, on July 15th, a medical examiner performed the autopsy and counted the damage. 7 gunshot wounds. 3 bullets passed clean through Matthew's body. 4 stayed inside. Together they tore through his right lung, his left lung, his heart, his diaphragm, his liver, his stomach, his spleen, a kidney, his ribs. There are shootings that read like panic, 1 or 2 wild shots from someone terrified. And there are shootings that read like a job being finished. The jury heard the wound list. You can guess which one they thought this was. Now we come to the single most important object in this entire case. Not the gun, the knife. Remember Tracy Grist's text to the neighbor Prosecutors sent in those first chaotic minutes. He had a knife, and my son Kevin shot him. That's a self-defense story compressed into one sentence. An armed, dangerous son-in-law, a brother protecting his family. Tragic, but legal. And sure enough, there was a knife at the scene. Physical, real, photographed, collected. So the state crime lab did what crime labs do. A forensic scientist tested that knife for DNA against all 4 people in this story: Matthew Restelli, Catherine Restelli, Kevin Ellis, Tracy Grist. The result came back. The knife had DNA from none of them. None. Think about what a knife goes through in a genuine life or death struggle. It's gripped hard by a sweating hand. It's fought over. In almost any real scenario where a man wields a knife with enough menace to justify 7 bullets, that man's DNA is on the handle. A knife with nobody's DNA on it isn't a weapon. It's a prop that nobody remembered to touch. The defense could argue contamination, degradation, the limits of forensic science, and DNA absence is not by itself proof of staging. But paired with everything else, the lures, the cleaning, the searches, the wound count, the prosecution's theory wrote itself. The knife wasn't part of the crime. It was part of the cover story. There's one more detail from that night that the prosecution hammered. While a man lay dying on her floor, Tracy Grist was slow to call 911. The neighbor across the street, who only heard the shots, was texting and calling. The woman standing inside the house with the body was not racing to summon help. On the stand, Grist had an answer for this too. Her fear response, she said, is to freeze. Some people fight, some flee, some freeze. She froze. And that's a real thing. Freezing is a documented human trauma response. Plenty of innocent people freeze. But prosecutors asked the jury to weigh it differently. A delay in calling for help isn't just a psychological quirk when the dying man is the person your family lured here. Every minute without paramedics was a minute Matthew Restelli's 7 wounds went unanswered. She also testified she never asked her son to kill Matthew, and that she didn't know about drug use in her son's life that prosecutors raised. Denial after denial after denial, each one reasonable alone. The jury's job was to decide if they were reasonable together. What followed was not one trial. It was a family being dismantled in sequence. Kevin Ellis, the shooter, faced trial for the killing itself. Catherine Restelli, the wife, pleaded guilty shortly after her arrest. Murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and discharge of a firearm. Her sentence: 1 to 15 years. Part of her deal was the hardest thing a family can produce: testimony against her own mother. And when she took the stand at Tracy Grist's trial, Catherine had to do something rare and ugly: explain her own lies. Her testimony hadn't always matched what she said at her brother's trial. Asked why, she admitted it plainly. She had lied to protect them, to protect Kevin, to protect her mom. The jury also saw the case through the eyes of the men who walked into it cold. Officer David Guerra of the American Fork Police Department, whose body cam from that night was played in court. The neighbor's home surveillance footage. The forensic scientist with the clean knife. The medical examiner with the wound chart. And Matthew's mother, who buried her son and then sat in a courtroom listening to the family he married into explain themselves. In the end, the jury didn't buy the jokes, the hiking trips, the true crime curiosity, or the freeze response. Tracy Grist, 60 years old, was convicted of murder, criminal conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and one more charge, the one that captures the full moral weight of this case: domestic violence in the presence of a child. Because Matthew Restelli's children, the children he drove to Utah to bring home, were connected to that house. Their father was killed by their uncle in their grandmother's home, in a plan their own mother pleaded guilty to joining. 3 generations of one family, and every adult in the chain chose this. Matthew Restelli made one mistake, and it wasn't cheating, and it wasn't the arguments, and it wasn't the failing marriage. His mistake was believing that the people who smiled at him across holiday dinners would use lawyers instead of bullets. Divorce would have cost Catherine Restelli a custody fight and half of everything. Instead, it cost her a murder conviction, 1 to 15 years, and the job of testifying against her own mother. Divorce would have cost Tracy Grist an ex-son-in-law. Instead, it cost her everything. Convicted in her own living room's crime, undone by a text message, a search history, and a knife that was supposed to save the story but had nobody's fingerprints on the plot. They called it the family trap. But here's the thing about traps built by families: they close on everyone inside. If this case disturbed you, a man lured to his death by the people he called family, subscribe. Because the most dangerous cases we cover aren't the ones with strangers in the dark. They're the ones where the door was opened from the inside.